Welcome to SVG TV News on Monday, October 31st, 2022. I am Rochelle Baptiste with the details. After a 2-year lull, the 2022 cruise season in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is set for a record-breaking comeback with approximately 326,000 cruise ship visitor arrivals expected for the 2022-2023 tourist season. This was outlined at a news conference today by Minister of Tourism Carlos James, who says a total of 305 scheduled calls are expected to the destination, of which 12 will be inaugural calls.
We are expecting a passenger count of roughly 320, just below 326,000 passengers. This is well over 250,000 passengers this year, and from my checks it will appear that it will be a record year in terms of our numbers of passenger arrivals for cruise in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I asked my team at the ministry, I said, look, I don't want to see a comparative analysis to last year's numbers, as we are now coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Take us back to pre-pandemic numbers and let us see how we are looking in terms of where we are in the context of our pre-pandemic numbers. So what that says to us is that it represents a 29% increase in cruise calls from our pre-pandemic numbers. Our benchmark here, 2018-2019, we're now at 29% more calls than we had during before the pandemic, and we have a 44% increase in cruise passenger arrivals in terms of our projections from our benchmark year 2018-2019. It is by all of the indications a pretty good showing in terms of the work that we had put in, even in the cruise season, in the pandemic period. Even myself, I got intimately involved with the discussions with the cruise lines, the government relations personnel, to ensure that St. Vincent and the Grenadines remained a favorable destination, even despite the COVID-19 pandemic and the explosive eruption of our Lasso volcano.
According to Minister James, the figures projected for the 2022-2023 cruise season is likely to be SVG's best performance in the last 20 years.
So it's really an impressive showing from all of the stakeholders involved: the Ministry of Tourism, the staff at the Tourism Authority, the Port Authority, and all of the agents who continuously negotiate and meet at conferences and in dialogue with all of the cruise lines to ensure that we get our quota and sufficient number of cruise calls to the destination. I want to say that despite these numbers, we could have even had a lot more calls to the destination. One of the challenges we had is the limitations we have at our cruise terminal. We are unable to dock 3 and 4 vessels per day. In fact, there are some vessels which some cruise lines wanted to come into St. Vincent and the Grenadines at a particular time. But because that slot was already booked and given to another cruise line, it became challenging for us to accommodate a number of cruise lines who would want to come on the same day in terms of the scheduled calls. It's a bit more convenient to have a bigger terminal that can accommodate 3 or 4 or 5 vessels at the same time. And we're quite pleased that the construction of the cargo terminal has started for the west of Kingston, which is going to free up a lot of space within the east of Kingston and the central Kingston, where we have the harbor, to facilitate the expansion of our cruise terminal.
Noting that he did indicate in 2020, on the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, that it will take roughly about 2 to 3 years to see some level of recovery to the pre-pandemic numbers in the industry. Minister James says the projections are, however, showing that the island is rapidly ahead in terms of recovery efforts in cruise tourism and is recovering faster than anticipated or predicted.
A commendable effort by all of the stakeholders involved. We will see a record year for cruise in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 2022-2023, and I'm looking forward to that. Those projections which we're hoping will stay, because you know there are cancellations, there may be things that may occur, but so far we're looking to see a record year for cruise. And just 1 year after the recovery from our volcano, eruption of Royal Asafri, and just 2 years off from the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think it's a commendable effort from all of the persons and stakeholders involved.
Quality Assurance Manager with the SVG Tourism Authority, Natalie James Schott, is encouraging stakeholders to get registered and get their license up to date.
Example, as a taxi operator, you want to work within the cruise season, you want to work with the hotels, you want to work at the airport. You would come into the Tourism Authority, or you can even ask us to email you that application form and you would register your business. With that registration, we ask for your vehicle registration, we ask for your driver's license. For new operators, we ask for police record and a valid first aid and CPR certificates. Once you have done all of this process, the next step would be training. The Tourism Authority is responsible for training of our stakeholder groups as well. So as a taxi operator, you would undergo training in customer service, tourism education, and if you do not have a valid first aid or CPR certificates, then we would engage the Red Cross in training you to have that valid certificate. The next step would be submitting the necessary information. Once you've done the training, passed the assessment, you would then be submitted to a board of directors for approval. Once you're approved, we have where you have your license will be granted to you.
Schott says currently there are over 450 registered taxi operators. However, of this number, only 250 are licensed.
This year we have, where I can show you, this is the color. We use a different color every year because, as we said, the license expires. So this would be the color for 2022-2023. So as a general public, if you see a taxi with this beautiful color, you would know that this person is a valid taxi operator. You're also going to see the tour operators, and I bring along this morning the cruise season tour bus pass. So you'll see the tour buses have this as well, this big one. And every year, as I said, we change the colors. If you do not pay a license on the 31st of October, you are registered with us, but you're not currently a licensed stakeholder. So we are asking, especially the taxi operators, it's a very exciting season. As the minister would have mentioned, we have lots of calls. For those persons who did not relicense, when I say relicense, did not come in the last 2 years, be inspected, be licensed, your Red Cross certificates would have expired. We're encouraging you, there's one session tomorrow, we're encouraging you to go and get your Red Cross certificates up to date and still come and get your license to operate for the 2020-23 season.
Sergeant Kenny Jones of the Traffic Department of the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force, who also addressed today's news conference, says given the fact that the country's road network doesn't have the capacity to facilitate a lot of traffic flow, officers will be regulating the traffic in Kingstown to ensure a smooth flow of traffic during the cruise and Christmas season.
In particular, at the cruise ship terminal, we've identified certain points where we realize that there is usually a backup of traffic, especially when you're leaving the terminal Right, so at those points, we want to place officers, strategically place officers at those points to ensure that there's a smooth flow of traffic. There has not been much traffic change in terms of how the traffic would flow, because as I mentioned before, we do not have the road network to facilitate that traffic changing around Kingston. So there will be officers placed outside of the cruise ship terminal. I don't know how many persons have traversed that area, but if you notice, we would have done some assessment in area walk along with Tourism Authority, and would have placed 2 pedestrian crossings just in the area of the custom gate, right? That is to facilitate pedestrians who are using the area, and we've done some assessment where we've seen persons utilizing those pedestrian crossings, which is a plus, right? We know that we're gonna have to place an officer there, because at the same time, when we want our visitors to use the crossing safely, we want to also ensure that there's a smooth flow of traffic and that there's not much inconvenience and delay and loss of time and resources in terms of our visitors being here. We have also looked at a relief system. This is usually being done when the tourist season is upon us, where we would activate our relief system, where there will always be a presence of a police officer. So it wouldn't just be for the tourist season, but we're heading into the busy Christmas season, where officer will always be present at the cruise ship terminal for the duration of the time when the cruise ship is in port. So they will be relieving each other at those points, just to ensure that law and order is being maintained on the streets and safety is being upheld on the streets of St. Vincent and Grenadines.
The 2022 SVG cruise season commences annually on November 1st, and this year will welcome its first scheduled call on Tuesday, November 2nd, and its second call on Wednesday, November 3rd, with the majestic Britannia of Piano Cruises with just over 3,600 visitors. In other news, government is said to be discussing at the level of cabinet to have duty-free concessions given to minibus operators who provide service specifically between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. This was noted by Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves in an interview with the Agency for Public Information on Friday. PM Gonsalves said the move is becoming even more urgent as government finalizes a system for the transportation of nurses on a long-term basis.
We're working through it. In fact, we have agreed in principle. It's a question now of implementing it. To provide 100% duty-free concession to minibus operators who operate routes after 6 o'clock in the evening up to 7 o'clock in the morning. That is important not only for nursing, but as the economy is increasingly transformed into a post-colonial one, with lots of hotels coming on stream and even the existing hotels. People have problems, hotels and restaurants and entertainment spots have problem keeping staff. So a more efficient transportation system after 6 p.m. in the evening is very important as the economy is diversified. And we would like to see the private sector work in that way, and we will provide concessions and supports. And that's a matter which the hoteliers and restaurateurs have raised with us. And it is something we can't just leave to chance. So it would be an attractive thing.
I like that.
If you can get a 100% concession. And
So,
if
and
indeed
you
we have other supports, we'll provide other supports because this is a vital thing. So it relates to the nurses, but it
killing
also
two birds
connects
with
to
one stone.
other workers.
Yeah.
So that is what I was speaking about dealing with that aspect of the transportation with urgency.
On another matter, the Prime Minister says one of the problems in nursing today has to do with the senior nurses whom he described as good people. But in the management of their staff, their attitudes have to change in how they deal with their juniors.
Like how some senior police officers in a more military context have to junior police officers and talk to them in certain ways and belittle them and so on. We have to do better than that, Candyman. And that's one of the problems with the nurses. I have the younger nurses, staff nurses, have with some of the supervisors. And what is painful is some who suffer humiliations when they get promoted. Some of them turn out and humiliate those below them. You over where I'm coming from. So this man who has been around for such a long time, whom the people have honored with nearly 22 years of prime ministership, I think that entitles me and endows me with the authority coming from my track record, not the authority as prime minister. This is as Ralph, as leader, to talk some home truths which don't get spoken. Now, let me say this. The senior nurses are also very dedicated and good people. But some of them sometimes, and in some cases oftentimes, don't have good or optimal interpersonal relationships with those whom they're supervising, and we have to get that right. And when I raise it, you get a defensiveness, but we don't need to be defensive about it. At the same time, the junior nurses have to be very respectful of the senior ones and be very professional too, because you have to have discipline.
The Prime Minister says he wants to meet with the nurses by the middle of November. And PM Gonzalez is currently in Venezuela meeting with representatives of the Alba Bank and finalizing some initiatives and arrangements on the Petrocaribe. Earlier this year, there were a number of agreements made on the Petrocaribe, including a commitment for 40,000 sacks of urea for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as shipments of oil. Recently, 15,000 barrels of oil arrived here, which is expected to see a reduction in electricity bills for consumers. Speaking with the Agency for Public Information, PM Gonzalez said other arrangements include $5 million for the redevelopment of Little Tokyo. Of 2.5 million is being given in the interim to begin work.
Need all the money one time. So we are pitching for 2.5 of it. No. So we can start, we can put it in the budget for 2023. So there's an Alba Bank meeting which I'm going to, so that I talk to the rest of the members of the board on that. But the leadership of the bank has already indicated that, yes, because it also has the blessing of the government itself of Venezuela.
The Prime Minister said while in Venezuela, he will also deal with the issue of the delay of some 150 prefab houses.
The plant which is producing these, they have a capacity problem. So I'm going to look at ways with them to see how we can, if there's anything we can refashion. In the meanwhile, I had sent a delegation including Montgomery Daniel, who has been Minister of Housing and who is very practical, and Orlando Brewster, Dr. Brewster, who is the current Minister of Health, with two technical persons to Guyana. I had made arrangements with the President of Guyana for them to come, and I'd spoken to him about this. They have green heart houses, hardwood houses, which would last 70, 80 years. We are the technical people doing the comparison between that and those which we had gotten out of Trinidad. Of course, we'd have to pay for the houses coming from Guyana or any new ones which we get out of Trinidad. So we're looking at the comparative prices.
PM Gonzalez says there is also a commitment of $4 million soft loan for a fishing fleet program, which will deal with long line fishing, of which the government will be getting $2 million. The Prime Minister says Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, Saboto Caesar, is dealing specifically with that program. While in Venezuela, the Prime Minister is expected to receive an honorary doctorate from the Bolivarian University of Venezuela. Miss Lotto and contestant number 7, Jada Ross, has been crowned Miss St. Vincent and the Grenadines 2022. Ross will not only be holding the title for a year, but she also won herself a university scholarship, a cash prize of 8,000 EC dollars, an HP laptop, 2-night stay at a penthouse suite for 2, and a spa certificate. Shandine McLean, Miss Davy, was adjudged first runner-up, with Sania Peters, Miss Flo, taking the second runner-up position. At the Royal Return pageant on Saturday night, 8 contestants graced the stage competing for the Miss SVG 2022 title. They were judged in several different categories, including Best Cultural Wear, Best Swimwear, Best Talent, and Best Interview. There were other categories in which the contestants were judged before the show, including the People's Choice Award, Best Community Service Project, Miss Photogenic, Miss Congeniality, and Miss Community Spirit. The People's Choice Award went to Shannon John. Miss Davy, winner of the Community Service Project, was Shannon John. Miss Photogenic, Shandine McLean. Miss Setco, Miss Congeniality, Shannon John. The Best Community Spirit contestant was Shannon John. The categories judged on the night of the show include Best Cultural Wear, which went to Sania Peters, Best Swimwear, Shandine McLean, Best Talent, Jada Ross, Best Evening Wear, Shandine McLean, and Best Interview, Jada Ross. Speaking on the API's program today, Miss SVG 2022, Jada Ross, said that the feeling of winning the title is indescribable, noting that the journey has been extremely rough. Ross said that the most memorable part of the show on Saturday night was her talent, which she was allowed to do twice and ended up winning the category.
Talent. The talent, no question. And I think that's the most memorable thing for the people of SVG as well. I simply went out for food yesterday and I had a few people be like, your talent was amazing. You did it twice and it was extremely hilarious. We loved it. And that's what I do. I remember in my unveiling speech, I mentioned that my aim is to entertain. I love making people laugh and making people smile. And whimsical personality just seems to be the exact thing to make that shine through. So I think my talent must have been the most memorable part. All of it was pretty amazing, but I had the most fun in talent.
Ross thanked all those who have supported her from day one up to the night of the pageant.
Ooh, okay, my auntie Kitty, Kathleen, Patricia Israel, Karen Vera, Latoya, Dorisha John. I think those were the 3 people that were keeping me grounded. And then it brought on to a lot of different people. So my dad at some point, my mom was helping me mentally for sure, my grandmother, my stepmom Yato, my siblings, although they had a different way of helping me to mentally prepare myself. They were really annoying, but there's the siblings. You really can't do anything about that. And just many people along the way. I have to give a whole address on social media because I know people are waiting on that. I'm extremely sorry for anybody that's seeing this for the fact that I have not address. But there are a lot of people to thank. There are so many people to thank.
Congratulations to her. In other news, the 11th Caribbean Beekeeping Congress was officially opened on Sunday, October 30th, under the theme Building the Resilience of a Beekeeping Industry After a Natural Disaster. The opening ceremony for the Beekeeping Conference, which will run for 4 days, was held at the cruise ship terminal in Kingstown. Declaring the Congress open was Minister of Agriculture Soboto Caesar, who said that there was a strong possibility that the local subsector will bring to the pockets of beekeepers and farmers over $10 million.
The children, it's part of our culture that when you see bees, you get out of the way of bees and Jack Spaniels. And it is something that the Ministry of Agriculture, that we have to help Vincentians on a whole to cross this very important hurdle, because there's a strong possibility that very soon we can see the apiculture subsector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines bringing not only $1 or $2 million to the pockets of the beekeepers and to the farmers of the country, but it can go beyond $10 million. And I really want to note not only to the Ministry of Agriculture, but also to the Ministry of Education. And I was very moved when I heard the previous presenters note that they're going to work with the stakeholders in one way or the other. Food security continues to play a very vital role, not only in production and productivity. As we are witnessing today, the significant inflation in the cost of food, it means that we have to protect all food ecosystems, because food production and productivity is critical to our very survival.
Minister Caesar noted that there are some countries in the region which are blocking the trade of honey and appeal for the removal of such trade barriers.
Welcome to all those who are here from the sub-region and the region. Let us give them a special round of applause, please. And what was not said earlier, as it pertains to regionalism, is that some countries are actually blocking the movement of trade in honey. In fact, I can remember sitting in a meeting and hearing someone say, "You can keep your honey and I'll keep my money." And because of that, there are some stakeholders in some member states that are not investing further in honey production and in apiculture in general, because they do not have access to very large markets. So when we speak about our honey import bill as a region going forward, I am asking for consensus as it pertains to the removal of trade barriers.
The Agriculture Minister highlighted another issue that is directly affecting beekeepers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that of fogging. He says the fogging system that is being used to curb the spread of mosquito-borne diseases has been a problem for the bees. However, they are working to have the issue resolved.
The foggers go through the communities on Facebook. I see Sabota Caesar, Minister, what are you going to do? And all speakers, inclusive of the Chief Agriculture Officer, dealt with the matter. And I want to note that the Pesticides Board, we have written to the Pesticides Board, we have engaged not only the Minister of Health, but the Chief Medical Officer, because in the public domain, the issue is a very important one. We all know how critical it is to ensure that the mosquitoes don't have their way. But we have to balance this, not only with the protection of the bees, but there are many persons in the scientific field who are also noting that there are far better opportunities that we have available today that we can utilize to protect both bees and human beings.
Friday, October 28th was the last day for the 2022 Everything Vinci Expo, a platform created for talented Vincentian entrepreneurs to showcase their products and services. Our news team spoke to some of these entrepreneurs and will be highlighting them during our newscast. The Beekeeping Threadworks focuses on clothing and upholstery. Here's more on this business.
Beekeeping Threadworks. What we have to offer here are locally handmade clothing, all done by local artisans artisans in Bequia, local seamstresses. We also offer services as alterations and repairs. We can do custom order work. We do upholstery work. We do embroidery work as well. The hand-dyed work is done by the ladies. And we are a non-profit organization as well in Bequia. Yes, we're on social media. We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram as well. The pictures actually are taken in Bequia by Bequia models, so we'll keep our models between Bequia and Simmency. But we are looking to, hopefully next year, to go online so persons can be able to purchase overbroad.
How has this expo helped?
Well, it's the first time for us here, so far it's been good. It's been good so far. I can't complain. We can't complain. Hopefully we should be in it next year, hopefully, so yes.
The Right Design is a bag-making design business with a catalog of 75 different styles of bags.
Types of bags including wristlets, wallets, duffels, backpacks, pouches, you name it. Once it's a type of bag, I will do it. It's creating a lot of exposure. I'm able to interact with persons, tell them about my business. A lot of intentions don't know that there are persons who do work like this, designing work like this. So it's good to be able to, let intentions know that there are persons who do this kind of thing here in St. Vincent. I started out of necessity. So my mother always had a sewing machine and I had some leatherette lying around and I needed a bag. So I started based off of that, crafting. I did my first bag when I was in college, and since then I have been honing my craft, so I've been developing in different skills in bag design and bag making.